Hi folks, I'm Matthew Fab with Western Washington Weather, and today in this video we're going to take a look at what is an atmospheric river. Now, an atmospheric river is a term that you hear a lot in big rain events, especially here in the Pacific Northwest and sometimes in California as well. So I thought it would be interesting to take a look at what an atmospheric river actually is, and I want to show that it's not just a term made up by the media or anything like that. It is an actual meteorological phenomenon that describes a type of rain event. So taking a look here at this graphic, you can see that an atmospheric river is a narrow band of high moisture which aids in heavy precipitation. And you can see in this graphic there's an atmospheric river aimed at Western Washington and Oregon. You can see there's a low center to its north and high pressure to its south, and in that area in between, the atmospheric river forms. Now, when an atmospheric river hits the coast, you can see coastal mountains get the lift, and the coastal mountains get some big rain totals, and then the same thing happens over a higher interior range. In Washington, this would be an example of the Olympics and then the Cascades. So some impacts: rain intensifies into narrow bands right along the coast. It doesn't really start raining until just a bit offshore with an atmospheric river, and then that rain continues inland as it gets basically wrung out like a wet sponge over these mountains with this orographic lift. Lift along the mountains aids in heavier rain and in some cases snow, especially at very high elevations like 7,000 to 10,000 feet can get snow even higher than that, but lower elevations below 7,000 feet don't usually get snow in atmospheric rivers, at least in Western Washington. So this is basically showing the meteorological definition of an atmospheric river, and these kind of graphics here show that this is not a term that was made up by the media or anything like that. It's not a hype term. It is an actual phenomenon. So you can see here, this is showing a view from the top, and you can see an atmospheric river is basically a small area, small relative to the size of the Earth. It's 850 kilometers wide, 3 kilometers deep, and you can see how it has a warm front and a cold front embedded in it, and then you have this high area of water vapor transport. IVT is called integrated vapor transport, basically how much water is in the atmosphere, and that area right in here, the yellow and the reddish there, are the heaviest rain in the atmospheric river, and that is right in this part here. And now we take a cross section of this, and you can see it's not very high, about 4 kilometers in height, which is not very big. When you're looking at weather, you can have thunderstorms that are easily 10, 15 kilometers high. So it's very low, and that is what allows it to really slam into those mountains, but it doesn't really impact areas much higher than that. So you can see how it's just this kind of small little feature that can have really big impacts once you get up close to it. So this is a forecast from 2023, and you can see that vapor transport, how you had the low pressure to the north, you had high pressure to the south, and then you can see this stretches from Hawaii up toward the Pacific Northwest, and you can see this enhanced area of water vapor like we were seeing in that previous graphic. And for those of you wondering why sometimes the term atmospheric river and Pineapple Express are used interchangeably in the Pacific Northwest, just take a look at this image. You have Hawaii down here in the bottom left, and you can see that moisture goes straight from Hawaii to the Pacific Northwest, and that is why it's called a Pineapple Express at times. However, the orientation of these can be different. You can have it come more from China and the Philippines and slam into the Northwest that way, in which case the Pineapple Express term is not used. And then this is just another of those images here. You can see how that atmospheric river with that high area of water vapor is impacting right into the Pacific Northwest there. Usually it's these areas with the absolute highest amount of water vapor that get the biggest rain. You can see how it slams into the Olympics and the Cascades. And you can see another part of the atmospheric river is that it does bring some pretty warm temperatures. It's bringing up air from the subtropics. If you remember that image we just looked at, it comes up from Hawaii, and it brings that hot air with it, and of course it moderates over the chilly Pacific Ocean, but it can still bring temperatures in the upper 50s to low 60s for parts of Western Washington, Western Oregon, even parts of Eastern Washington and Oregon as well. And then you can see in this graphic, it shows all of the river locations that can flood during atmospheric rivers. And in this event, this was a 2023 event, you can see how a lot of places reached major flooding, moderate flooding, and then these yellow dots, which means the rivers reach bank full. So it doesn't take all that much to bring all the rivers across Western Washington into bank full or flood stage with an atmospheric river. And then another thing here, you can see in this forecast how the forecast models pick up on the atmospheric river with not very much rain off the coast, but then you can see the southern slopes of the Olympic Mountains and then parts of the Cascades are wringing out that atmospheric river, wringing it out like a sponge as that it lifts over the mountains. It basically squeezes out all the moisture it possibly can, bringing huge rain totals at times to parts of the area mountains here. So then what can an atmospheric river do? Well, take a look at this video I took in 2023. You can see it can bring some big flooding. This is, of course, at Snoqualmie Falls along the Snoqualmie River there. And you can see how it's just totally full. If we go a little bit further here, you can see the river is just completely full with heavy rain, and the combination of heavy rain and snowmelt is what can cause flooding like this. And here another video, this is from Federal Way and an atmospheric river in 2021, and you can see they also cause a lot of street flooding, especially when you've got leaves on the trees and stuff like that in an early season atmospheric river, but also at different times throughout the year, they can cause street flooding, they can cause urban and small stream flooding as well, flooding creeks and stuff like that. So then when we take a look at this here, you can see a recap of the impacts of an atmospheric river. I like to just kind of be able to put it in a table and just talk about all of it. So heavy rain, an atmospheric river brings heavy rain totals in a short amount of time, contributing to urban, small stream, and river flooding. High snow levels. This is a driving factor behind atmospheric river-induced flooding, as snow levels can reach 7,000 to 10,000 feet because of that warm subtropical air moving into the area, and that goes right to the next point. It contributes to warm and muggy conditions during atmospheric rivers, with lowland highs in the mid-50s to low 60s and mountain highs in the upper 30s to mid-40s. And all of these kind of come together to bring the potential for flooding. As you can see in this image in the background, this was Snoqualmie Falls in 2021 after an atmospheric river. The rivers across the Pacific Northwest really swell when you have these big atmospheric rivers that move through. So I hope this video was helpful, that you got to learn something about an atmospheric river and why it's called that, why it impacts the area, and how it's not a hype term. It's just, again, a meteorological term that has gained a lot more usage in the media over the last few years as big atmospheric rivers have hit the Northwest and California and British Columbia. But it's not something to really be scared of. It's just, in some cases, yes, they can be very devastating, but in a lot of cases, they can actually be very beneficial, and they can help build up reservoir storage, and at very high elevations, they can bring a lot of snow that will then melt off into reservoir water for summers and stuff like that. So in a lot of cases, they're not something to be afraid of. It's just something it's good to be educated on it. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you want to support the channel here, you can subscribe here to Western Washington Weather, and you can follow me on Blue Sky, on the Western Washington Weather Facebook group, and on Twitter, and the links to all of these are in the description below. So thank you all for watching Western Washington Weather, and I hope you learned something about atmospheric rivers.